Tonight we step into the hazy twilight of a Mughal court, but not the one of shimmering palaces and jewel-encrusted thrones you might expect. No, your bare feet crunch into straw and dried dung, and the smell that hits you is so heavy it clings to your hair. You're standing in the shadow of the Mughal elephant stables, where beasts the size of buses shift and rumble, their breath steaming in the humid air. You probably won't survive this. One lazy swing of a trunk could snap your spine like a breadstick, but for now, you're oddly calm, watching history's strangest blend of power, politics, and pachyderms play out in front of you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The ground beneath you is trampled flat by centuries of giant feet, layered with straw, husks, and faintly glistening puddles that you'd rather not think about too long. Above you rise wooden beams blackened by smoke, with thick chains hanging down like iron vines. Every sound is magnified, the creak of leather harness, the shuffle of hay, and the low, resonant rumble of an elephant, vibrating in your chest like a bass speaker. You're not just walking into a barn, you're walking into a beating heart of Mughal imperial power. The Mughal emperors, beginning with Babur and especially under Akbar, prized elephants as more than beasts of burden. They were military machines, ceremonial icons, and symbols of divine rule. At the peak, the stables of Akbar housed thousands of elephants. Historians still argue whether the number was closer to 5,000 or more modestly around 1,700, but either way, you're surrounded by an impossible herd. Imagine the logistical nightmare of feeding these creatures. Each one devours hundreds of pounds of fodder daily. You suddenly feel grateful your own fridge only needs occasional restocking with yogurt and leftover pizza. As you inch forward, a mahout, the elephant's lifelong handler, nods at you. His shirt is smeared with sweat and something darker, and he smells like he's been hugging a haystack inside a sauna. He mutters to the elephant, and the animal responds with a delicate brush of its trunk across his shoulder, almost tender. You realize quickly that you are intruding in a space where the human-animal relationship is far more complex than just master and beast. These elephants are extensions of the emperor's will. Control the elephants, and you control the empire's muscle. A whisper drifts from two officials standing in the shade. They glance nervously at the animals while discussing grain quotas and missing silver coins. Even here, in a place of dung and chains, politics worms its way in. Elephant stables weren't just zoos, they were banks of prestige and power. An elephant gifted by the emperor could secure loyalty, or at least buy some nervous gratitude. And losing one in battle was more than a financial blow, it was a humiliation. One particular elephant catches your eye. Its tusks are capped with gleaming brass sheaths, catching the lantern glow. It shifts its weight like a bored wrestler, as if remembering battles past. This isn't just decoration. Historically, elephants were armored, their tusks sharpened, and they thundered into battle lines like tanks before tanks existed. The sight must have been terrifying unless you were the poor infantry soldier directly in front of one. The stable walls echo with layers of sound, the mutter of mahouts reciting charms, the scratching of scribes noting down feed allocations, the metallic clang of chains being checked. The emperor, somewhere across the palace grounds, may never smell this stench or hear this chaos, but his power resonates here. A stable this size isn't just animal care, it's empire maintenance. And tucked in one corner, you see something odd. A line of jars sealed with wax, labeled in Persian script. One mahout lifts the lid and smears a paste onto an elephant's forehead. The scent is sharp, herbal, almost medicinal. You realize these are ointments, mixtures of neem, turmeric, and even powdered gems, because of course, if you're an emperor who bathes in rose water, your elephants are getting gemstone facials. Some fringe accounts even mention crocodile dung as part of sunblock for elephants, which makes you wonder, who was the poor guy who had to collect that? The deeper you walk, the more you sense the politics woven into the hay. Placement matters: whose elephant stands closest to the emperor's ceremonial beast? Which nobles are entrusted with the fiercest war elephants? Even the order of feeding could signify rank. An ignored elephant wasn't just a hungry animal, it was an insult to its owner. It's as though the stables themselves were a living court of hierarchy, each stall a whisper of loyalty or rivalry. One corner rings with laughter. A group of young nobles, dressed in bright silks, are daring each other to approach the largest bull. The elephant eyes them with slow, suspicious intelligence. You realize the animal could end this teenage bravado with one sneeze. But here, bravado and danger are part of growing into Mughal politics. Get close to the emperor's beasts, and maybe, just maybe, the emperor himself notices you. Your ears catch another sound: drums in the distance. Not war drums, but the measured beat of time, used to regulate feeding, exercise, and rituals. Elephants lived on routine, and so did the men who served them. Yet, behind the order, you can almost feel the tension. A single spooked elephant could tear through rows of stalls, collapsing timber and crushing whoever stood in its path. The delicate balance here is not just political, it's physical survival. You pause at the entrance again, looking back at the endless line of animals. Some sway gently, hypnotic in their rhythm, while others eye you with an unnerving awareness. You feel very small, very temporary, in the presence of something both magnificent and menacing. The Mughal Empire may rise and fall, emperors may be crowned and dethroned, but as long as elephants remain, the stables hum with their own kind of authority. You walk further in, and it dawns on you that this isn't just a random menagerie of oversized animals. No, this is a military academy, a palace wing, and a corporate office all rolled into one, except your co-workers weigh 6 tons and have a habit of sneezing hay onto your face. The Mughal stables hum with structure, a hierarchy that extends not only to the nobles and mahouts but to the elephants themselves. You quickly realize, even here, the animals are ranked like courtiers, with some basking in pampered luxury and others doomed to grunt work. At the very top of this pachyderm pyramid are the Raj Hathis, the royal elephants. These are the celebrities of the herd, chosen for ceremonial processions, coronations, and public festivals. They wear embroidered caparisons that sparkle in the sun, their tusks painted with saffron paste, their ears perfumed with oils. You glance at one now, its forehead gleams with vermilion marks, and a pair of guards fan it lazily with yaktail whisks. If elephants could file HR complaints, this one would probably write, workload, almost none. Perks, infinite mangoes. A tier below are the Ranj Hathis, the war elephants, each a towering tank of hide, tusk, and trained aggression. Their tusks are sometimes capped with iron spikes, their hides toughened with leather armor, and their temperaments deliberately sharpened. You imagine standing in front of one on a battlefield, watching it charge with drums thundering in the background, and suddenly you're grateful your biggest battle today was convincing yourself to fold laundry. Historians still argue whether these war elephants were truly effective in later centuries, when cannons and muskets changed the battlefield, or whether they became more symbolic than practical. Either way, they carried enormous weight, literally and politically. Then there are the Bada Hathis, the burden carriers. You see them lumbering past, their backs creaking under bales of fodder or even marble slabs for palace construction. They don't get perfumes or gemstone ointments, they get harness scars and grumpy sighs. Their place in the stable's pecking order is obvious: less silk, more sweat. Still, they are indispensable. You can't run an empire, let alone build a fort, without moving impossibly heavy loads. You mutter a silent thanks that your Amazon packages arrive without an elephant being involved. And at the very bottom, pitted yet still essential, are the training calves, the recruits. Gangly and playful, they sometimes chase each other, knocking over buckets, earning swats from their frustrated mahouts. You spot one now, flapping its ears like an oversized puppy trying to impress everyone. Its future depends on temperament, lineage, and sheer luck. Will it rise to ceremonial glory, or spend its life hauling timber? It's like a Mughal version of Hogwarts sorting, except the hat is a grumpy mahout with a stick. As you watch, a line of scribes passes by, recording details in thick ledgers. They note each elephant's name, weight, diet, and temperament. Yes, names every elephant has one, often grandiose, like Storm of Battle or Moonlit Glory. You wonder if somewhere in the dusty records lurks a name like Barry, and whether anyone ever dared laugh at it. Quirky detail: Akbar was known to give elephants titles almost as if they were nobility, an odd mix of affection and imperial branding. Nearby, two nobles whisper about which elephant is assigned to whom. To be granted charge of a war elephant is no small matter. It signals trust, rank, and a chance to shine in battle. Being assigned a lumbering burden carrier? That's like being told you get the office copier as your project. And yet, the politics of elephant hierarchy mirrored the politics of the court. Some nobles bribed mahouts to exaggerate an elephant's strength, hoping to secure a more prestigious beast. Others plotted to sabotage rivals by spreading rumors that their elephants were cowardly or cursed. You lean against a post, trying to take it all in. The air vibrates with layers of meaning. Elephants aren't just animals, they're avatars of imperial control. Each rung of the hierarchy reflects both the animal's role and the owner's clout. If your elephant appears in a grand procession, glittering with jewels, the crowd isn't just admiring the beast, they're admiring you. You realize suddenly that the elephants, in their own way, are like Instagram influencers. Except instead of brand deals, they carry symbolic legitimacy for the Mughal elite. But hierarchy isn't without tension. One war elephant, tethered with thick iron chains, suddenly trumpets, tossing its head. Its ears flare, and mahouts scramble to calm it, shoving fodder under its trunk, chanting soothing words. You freeze, heart racing, because this outburst feels less like an animal tantrum and more like a challenge to the social order. If elephants had politics, this one would probably be the radical reformer, sick of its chain and ready to unionize. The noblemen around you exchange wary glances. An unstable elephant isn't just dangerous, it's embarrassing. Losing control of one's beast in public can mean losing face at court. There are stories of nobles quietly demoted after their elephants ran amok in processions, trampling vendors and scattering crowds. For an emperor who prizes order, such chaos is unacceptable. And then comes a moment of calm. The trumpeting dies down, the elephant accepts a sugarcane stalk, and the stable exhales in unison. It reminds you that the entire hierarchy, as solid as it appears, rests on the fragile temper of creatures who can crush stone underfoot. Delicate politics, indeed. You walk past a row of ceremonial elephants, their foreheads glowing with paint. Somewhere in this line stands the emperor's personal mount, the most exalted of all. That elephant's rank eclipses even high nobles. It is a living throne, a creature elevated above humans. To ride it is to embody sovereignty. You suddenly realize that the Mughal elephant hierarchy doesn't just reflect politics, it creates it, shapes it, enforces it. Behind you, the playful calf knocks over another bucket, splashing water across the dusty floor. A mahout groans, nobles laugh, and for one fleeting second, the immense, trembling edifice of hierarchy feels almost human, fragile, humorous, and absurd. You smile, because even in the heart of empire, someone is always slipping on a banana peel. You edge deeper into the stables and realize the humans here are almost as fascinating as the elephants themselves. The mahouts, those lean, sunburned men with rope burns on their palms and a kind of permanent squint from years in the glare, are everywhere, tending, muttering, coaxing. Each one is paired with a single elephant for life, and the bond is so deep it looks less like employment and more like a weird marriage where your spouse weighs 6 tons and eats your entire garden in one sitting. The mahout you trail tonight hums to his elephant as if whispering a lullaby. The animal responds by brushing its trunk across his arm, gentle and deliberate. It's not affection in the way you might pet a cat, but it's definitely trust. Lose that trust, and you risk a trunk slap that can send you flying across the stable. You watch the man slip a small amulet, beads strung with bright thread, onto a nail in the wooden beam. That, you realize, is a charm, part of the mahout's arsenal of superstitions. Some carried coins with astrological markings, others recited Sanskrit verses or Persian prayers before mounting their beasts. A quirky tidbit: there are recorded cases of mahouts insisting that certain lucky dates were the only safe days to move elephants, which must have driven imperial logisticians crazy. You crouch beside a pile of straw, watching as the mahout mixes feed into a bucket. A blend of jaggery, rice, and ghee, basically the elephant equivalent of a protein shake. He slips a piece into his own mouth first, chews, and then hands the rest to the animal. You blink. Yes, he just taste-tested dinner for his elephant. That's how tightly woven the relationship is. Poison was always a fear, after all. What better way to cripple a noble than by killing his elephant? So, many mahouts developed this strange practice of pre-sampling, trusting their stomachs to detect foul play. But trust could only go so far. You see a darker side as another mahout, struggling with a restless calf, raises a hooked gourd, the ankus. The sharp metal tip glints under the torchlight. One jab behind the ear and the calf freezes, trembling. The crowd of nobles doesn't even flinch. Discipline is part of the spectacle. You feel your stomach twist, because the politics of control here isn't just about bribes or orders, it's etched into the very skin of these animals. And yet, paradoxically, mahouts were often fiercely protective. The emperor might own the elephant on paper, but in practice, it was the mahout who held the leash, literally and figuratively. Some historians still argue whether emperors could truly command their elephants, or whether they relied so heavily on mahouts that their power in this arena was more symbolic than real. Either way, the handlers wielded quiet influence. Anger a mahout, and your prized war elephant might conveniently fall ill before a campaign. Please him, and your elephant suddenly shines at inspection. You overhear a story swapped between two keepers. It's about a legendary elephant that refused to obey anyone but its mahout. When the emperor tried to mount it without permission, the animal knelt stubbornly and refused to budge until the mahout whispered the right words. The courtiers laughed, but everyone knew the moral: ignore the mahouts at your peril. You notice that many of them live right here in the stables, in cramped huts beside the stalls. Their lives revolve around these animals, feeding, cleaning, massaging, and even singing them to sleep. Yes, singing. You hear it now, a slow, rhythmic chant rising above the rustle of straw, meant to soothe nerves and remind the elephants of routine. The cadence is hypnotic, making even you feel drowsy. But beneath the tenderness lies a streak of ruthlessness. Punishments could be severe. A stubborn elephant might be starved for a day, or chained in isolation, stripped of its handler's voice and touch. The cruelest stories speak of mahouts using pepper smoke blown into the elephant's trunk to correct bad behavior. You wince, because it's hard to reconcile the soothing lullabies with pepper torture. But then again, this is Mughal politics, delicate, contradictory, and never simple. The mahout in front of you now crouches, inspecting his elephant's feet. He scrapes away packed mud and applies a thick herbal paste. You catch the scent: camphor, mustard oil, maybe even saffron. He mutters about infections, about how the emperor has no idea how fragile these mighty beasts actually are. It's a small, whispered rebellion, but it tells you everything. While the court sees elephants as icons of invincible power, the mahouts know them as vulnerable, temperamental creatures that can be felled by something as simple as a cracked toenail. And here's the twist, the emperor knows it too. That's why mahouts are watched carefully, monitored, sometimes rewarded lavishly, sometimes punished brutally. They stand at a dangerous crossroads, humble servants, yet indispensable, low in social rank, yet holding the keys to imperial prestige. One misstep, and they could vanish into obscurity, or worse. Still, as you linger in the straw-scented gloom, you can't help admiring their skill. They ride elephants bareback, steering with knees and whispered commands. They can sense a shift in mood from a flick of the ear. They know when to soothe, when to push, when to bribe with a chunk of sugarcane. It's artistry born of necessity, a choreography as delicate as any courtly dance. The mahout you've been shadowing pats his elephant's flank, then leans against it as though resting against a wall. The animal rumbles softly, almost like a giant purr, and both man and beast close their eyes. In that moment, you realize you're witnessing a relationship older than empires, older than dynasties, a fragile partnership built on fear, respect, violence, and affection all at once. And then the spell breaks. A shout echoes down the corridor, an official calling for an imperial inspection. The mahout snaps awake, his face tightening with tension. Politics is about to intrude again, and in this place, every inspection is a test not just of elephants but of the men who guide them. The call for inspection ripples through the stables like a draft of cold air. Mahouts stiffen, scribes scramble to tidy their ledgers, and even the elephants seem to pick up on the tension, swaying uneasily. You feel your pulse quicken because you know this isn't just a casual walkthrough, it's an imperial event, a performance where tusks and tempers will be judged, and reputations can rise or collapse with the flick of an emperor's hand. You step aside as a line of guards marches in, clearing the way. Their spears glint under the torchlight, their eyes darting nervously at the massive animals towering above them. Behind them, the murmurs of anticipation grow louder, and then, there he is. The emperor himself. Robed in silks that shimmer like spilled oil, a turban crowned with a jewel the size of a pigeon's egg, he carries himself like a man who knows he commands more than armies. He commands elephants. You catch your breath because the atmosphere shifts immediately. Nobles bow, attendants scuttle, and mahouts press their foreheads to the ground. Even the elephants seem to hush, their low rumbles softening, as if they recognize this figure too. You realize quickly that these inspections aren't really about animal health, they're political theater, a chance for the emperor to demonstrate mastery over nature and by extension, over his empire. The first elephant presented is colossal, its tusks gleaming with brass caps, its hide freshly oiled. The mahout nudges it forward with subtle pressure from his knees, and the elephant bows its head in a slow, deliberate gesture. The crowd murmurs approval. The emperor steps closer, inspecting the curve of the tusks, the smoothness of the skin. He even runs a jeweled hand along the animal's trunk. You almost laugh at the absurdity. This is like a CEO conducting performance reviews on employees the size of freight trains. And just like in any performance review, the stakes are high. If the elephant impresses, the mahout might receive gold, the noble in charge might secure favor, and the animal itself could be assigned to grander duties. But if the beast falters, if it flinches, stumbles, or, heaven forbid, defecates in front of the emperor, the consequences could ripple like an earthquake. Some records tell of mahouts demoted or punished because their elephants refused to cooperate. Historians still argue whether these stories are exaggerated, but the tension in the room tonight makes you think there's truth in them. The emperor claps once, sharply. A second elephant lumbers forward, this one visibly younger, its tusks shorter, its eyes restless. The mahout whispers frantically, pressing his knees, tapping with the ankus. The elephant hesitates. The silence thickens. You hold your breath. For a moment, it looks like disaster, then, with a shudder, the animal bends its knees in an awkward bow. The crowd exhales collectively, and the emperor's lips curve into a faint smile. Disaster averted. You realize you've been gripping the edge of a hay bale so tightly your fingers ache. You glance around and notice the nobles are not just watching elephants, they're watching each other. Every flicker of the emperor's expression is studied, interpreted, gossiped about. Did he nod approvingly? Did he frown at that mahout's hesitation? It's all currency in the endless marketplace of imperial politics. The elephants are pawns, yes, but they're also mirrors, reflecting the fortunes of the men who surround them. And then comes the real spectacle. A war elephant is led out, its tusks sheathed in iron spikes, its head protected by a leather cap. The emperor gestures, and suddenly drums thunder, horns blare. The elephant charges forward, smashing through a wooden barricade set up for the display. The splinters fly like confetti, nobles cheer nervously, and you can feel the vibration of its charge in your ribs. You realize this isn't just a show of strength, it's a reminder. The emperor is signaling, "These are my weapons, my living tanks, my untamable power harnessed at will." Quirky detail, you overhear one courtier whispering about how some emperors had favorite elephants that they inspected more tenderly than others, even giving them extra garlands of flowers or feeding them sugarcane by hand. There's a story of Jahangir insisting on painting detailed portraits of his elephants, cataloguing their unique traits like a proud dad with a photo album. You smile, because beneath all the pomp, there's something oddly endearing about emperors fawning over their tusked pets. But not everyone is so sentimental. You catch the eye of a grizzled noble watching the inspection. His lips are thin, his eyes calculating. For him, this isn't about beauty or affection, it's about leverage. If he can secure a powerful elephant team, his military clout increases. If his rival's elephants are shamed in front of the emperor, his own rank rises by comparison. To him, the emperor's inspection is less about animals and more about political survival. The emperor signals again, and the parade continues. Elephant after elephant steps forward, each polished, perfumed, and trembling with restrained energy. Some bow gracefully, others balk nervously. Each one is a test, each one a political maneuver disguised as animal husbandry. And through it all, you can't shake the sense that this ceremony is as delicate as it is grand. One misstep, one accident, and the entire fragile illusion of control could shatter. Finally, the emperor raises his hand, signaling the end. The nobles bow, the mahouts slump in relief, and the elephants are led back to their stalls. The emperor departs as suddenly as he arrived, leaving behind the scent of sandalwood and the heavy silence of exhausted tension. You lean back against a post, letting your heart slow. The inspection is over, but the memory lingers. It wasn't just about tusks and bows, it was about power, prestige, and the precarious balance between man and beast, emperor and servant, order and chaos. As the torches gutter in the dimming stable, you think, in a world where elephants are performance reviewed like employees and emperors play HR manager, survival depends less on strength and more on your ability to bow at the right time. The torches sputter, the emperor's retinue fades into the distance, and yet the air doesn't relax, it tightens, as though invisible threads of intrigue are strung between every stall. You realize something crucial. The elephant stables aren't just a storage lot for oversized pets. They're a stage, a chessboard, maybe even the empire's gossip column. This is where deals are whispered, favors traded, and rivalries sharpened. The stables are politics dressed up in hay and hide. You notice a group of nobles lingering after the inspection. Their robes shimmer faintly in the torchlight as they gather under a shadowed awning. They're not talking about feed or tusks, they're trading rumors. One mentions that the emperor gifted a prized elephant to a governor in Bengal. Another mutters about how such a gift isn't just generous, it's strategic, a way of cementing loyalty in a region where rebellion always simmers. You catch the drift. Elephants are currency, living tokens of imperial favor, handed out not unlike fat bonuses at year's end. Across the stable, another cluster of men argues more quietly. They're discussing stall placement, yes, stall placement. Which noble's elephant gets tethered near the emperor's ceremonial beast is no trivial matter. A spot close to the royal elephant implies proximity to power, a whisper of influence. Being shoved to the far stalls? That's practically a demotion, a stable-sized version of being moved to the basement office with no windows. You smirk, because apparently, office politics transcends time and species. But the stakes here are higher than cubicle envy. The elephants themselves are woven into court factions. If a noble's elephant misbehaves, rivals pounce on the chance to spread gossip. Ah, see? Even his beast refuses obedience. Imagine trusting him with soldiers. On the other hand, if an elephant performs spectacularly, charging through barricades or kneeling with flawless grace, its owner basks in reflected glory. Historians still argue whether emperors deliberately used elephants as tools of factional balance, handing out weaker animals to some nobles and stronger ones to others, to prevent any single faction from monopolizing brute force. And then there's bribery. You watch a mahout slip a folded pouch into a scribe's hands. A quiet transaction, unnoticed by most. But you know what it is, a little payment to ensure the ledger records the elephant's weight generously, or its temperament described as spirited instead of liable to stomp you flat. The paper trail of elephants becomes as political as the animals themselves. The quills scratch, and suddenly reputations shift. You wander past a war elephant swaying in its chains, eyes half shut. A noble in brocade whispers to his retinue about using the animal in an upcoming campaign, his voice tinged with pride. But another noble, listening nearby, scoffs under his breath. The rival faction, perhaps? The tension is thick enough to slice with a tusk. You realize the stables are less about hay and water and more about subtle rivalries playing out through trunks and tusks. Quirky detail. You overhear a tale of an elephant who refused to let a particular noble mount it, throwing him unceremoniously to the ground during a procession. The story spread like wildfire, and soon people joked that the elephant itself was a better judge of loyalty than the emperor's spies. You grin, because let's face it, if your career can be torpedoed by a cranky elephant, Mughal politics makes modern workplace drama look tame. And while you chuckle, you catch a darker whisper. Some nobles scheme to deliberately sabotage rivals' elephants, slipping in spoiled fodder, bribing mahouts to overwork them, even sneaking charms said to curse their temper. It's cloak and dagger, except the daggers are hidden in buckets of rice. You wonder how many imperial scandals were born not in gilded halls but right here, amid the smell of hay and dung. You pause beside a calf, its eyes wide, ears flapping as though eavesdropping too. Maybe it senses the tension, maybe it just wants another sugarcane stalk. Either way, you feel the truth settling on you. The elephants are more than beasts. They're political actors, unwitting but powerful. Each step they take, each bow or trumpet, ripples through the fragile web of Mughal court life. As the night deepens, the nobles drift away, their whispers trailing into the dark. The mahouts resume their quiet chores, brushing hides, mending chains, humming lullabies. The elephants sway, restless shadows against the lamplight. And you, caught between their massive silence and the lingering echoes of courtly gossip, realize just how delicate this balance is. A single gift, a single misplaced stall, a single elephant tantrum, any of it could tilt alliances, shake loyalties, or spark whispers that echo all the way to the emperor's ears. You let your hand rest on the rough wooden post, grounding yourself. In this world, politics doesn't just happen in throne rooms. It breathes here, in the hay and shadows, in the rumble of elephants and the quick glances of nobles. The stables are not a backdrop to Mughal power. They are Mughal power, messy, fragrant, and absurdly majestic. The air outside the inspection hall shifts as dawn creeps up, painting the sky with faint streaks of grey and gold. You're still in the stables, and now the talk isn't about inspections or stall placement, it's about bloodlines. Because in the Mughal world, elephants aren't simply gathered from the forests and tossed into service. No, their value lies in who their parents were, what traits they inherited, and whether they can carry the empire's prestige in their towering frames. You follow two scribes hunched over scrolls filled with spidery Persian script. They're not writing poetry, though they might as well be. They're documenting genealogy. Yes, elephant genealogy. Each line traces the parentage of prized animals, noting which calf descended from which war hero or which ceremonial giant. To outsiders it might seem absurd, but here it's deadly serious. A lineage tied to a famous battlefield elephant is like wearing a badge of nobility. You pause by a paddock where a female elephant sways protectively around her calf. The calf bumbles in the straw, tripping over its trunk, earning amused snorts from nearby mahouts. You'd think this is just a tender scene, but to the nobles watching, it's high-stakes economics. A healthy calf of a prestigious line can be promised as a future gift to a loyal governor or dangled as bait in a diplomatic negotiation. You remember that the Ottomans prized white elephants, and so did the Thais, and suddenly the Mughal obsession with rare breeds makes perfect sense. White elephants, especially, are whispered about here, their pale hides seen as omens of prosperity and divine favor. Historians still argue whether the Mughals ever truly possessed albino elephants or whether clever paint jobs fooled the eye, but the fascination was real either way. You overhear one courtier boasting, "My elephant traces back to the beast that carried Akbar at Panipat." His rival rolls his eyes, muttering about how that line was weakened by cowardly offspring. It's less like casual bragging and more like nobles arguing over luxury car models, except their cars eat 200 pounds of fodder a day and occasionally decide to crush people. You chuckle, because really, how else could status be measured in a world where everyone already owns silks and jewels? Mahouts join this conversation too, though in quieter tones. One describes a calf's temperament, calm, steady, good with people. Another grimaces, noting that a different calf inherited its sire's stubborn streak. You realize breeding isn't just about physical size, it's about personality, trainability, even charm. In a world where elephants march in processions and battlefields, a temperamental beast is both an asset and a liability. Quirky detail. Some records suggest that Mughal breeders tried odd methods to influence offspring. Calves were sometimes fed mixtures of herbs or even honey-soaked fruits to sweeten their temperaments. Others claim elephants exposed to music in their youth grew calmer, more regal. You wonder if this was real science or just early parenting advice gone wild. Play the sitar near your elephant calf for better focus. But breeding isn't just about science or superstition, it's politics. A noble receiving a calf from imperial stock was being invited into an inner circle of trust. Refusing such a gift? Almost unthinkable. Accepting it meant entering into a lifelong tie with the emperor. Because an elephant was not a temporary gift, it demanded decades of care, fodder, and expense. It was like receiving a child that eats like 100 horses. Congratulations, your loyalty is now secured by bankruptcy risk. As you walk along the stalls, you notice tension between regions, too. Some elephants hail from Bengal, known for their riverine training and stamina. Others come from the Deccan, celebrated for their size and toughness. Nobles debate endlessly over which bloodline is superior, slipping into the kind of arguments modern fans reserve for sports teams. It's amusing, but you also sense the edge beneath their words. Regional pride bleeds into imperial politics, and every claim about better elephants doubles as a jab at rival governors. The calf you saw earlier suddenly trumpets, its tiny trunk quivering as though declaring itself to the world. The nobles laugh, but the mother shifts protectively, ears flaring. The sound echoes across the stable, and for a moment, everyone stops, scribes, mahouts, even you. That little trumpet is more than adorable. It's the sound of the empire's future, a reminder that politics here isn't built only on palaces and treaties, but on the wobbly legs of newborn elephants. One old mahout, crouched nearby, murmurs something to you without lifting his eyes. He says the emperor's fortune is tied to these calves, that as long as the elephants multiply and thrive, the empire will too. His voice is half superstition, half prophecy, but it sticks with you. Because you realize that in this world, elephants aren't simply animals, they're metaphors for continuity, stability, and even divine blessing. As the sun finally breaks across the horizon, golden light filtering through the stable doors, you see scribes close their ledgers and nobles drift away, their arguments unfinished but their ambitions sharpened. The elephants settle into a morning rhythm, calves play, mothers sway, bulls snort impatiently for breakfast. And you, leaning against the doorway, feel it all, the weight of lineage, the absurdity of painted white elephants, the politics of baby calves destined to carry armies or parades. This isn't just breeding. It's dynastic strategy, played out not in the marble halls of a palace but in the straw-strewn shadows of a stable. By now you're starting to realize that the Mughal elephant stables are less like barns and more like miniature cities, cities that never sleep, cities where everything runs on an endless stream of fodder, water, ointments, bribes, and sweat. If the genealogies of the elephants are the empire's dynastic spreadsheets, then the logistics of their daily care are its plumbing and electricity, messy, invisible, and absolutely essential. You catch sight of a wagon creaking through the gates, pulled by oxen and piled high with green stalks of sugarcane. The mahouts cheer faintly, because sugarcane means calm elephants, and calm elephants mean fewer broken bones today. You trail behind the wagon, watching men haul massive bundles into troughs. Each elephant lunges eagerly, trunks sweeping like vacuum hoses, tearing into the cane with a crunch that echoes like falling timber. You realize with a chill that feeding just one elephant for a single day costs more grain than an entire village might see in a week. Multiply that by hundreds or thousands, and suddenly the stables look less like an animal yard and more like an empire-draining black hole of resources. A scribe nearby mutters figures under his breath, jotting down how many bundles were delivered, how many were misplaced, and how much silver went missing along the way. Ah yes, corruption. You can see it already. A wagon arrives with 10 bundles, but only 8 are recorded. Somewhere between the riverbank and the stable, 2 bundles vanished. Everyone knows they were sold off in the bazaar, feeding merchants instead of elephants, but no one says it aloud. It's the delicate politics of imperial supply chains: skim too much, and the elephants starve; skim just enough, and everyone from scribe to wagon driver gets a cut. You wander past the water troughs next. Buckets clatter as men haul river water in endless chains, pouring it into basins carved from stone. Elephants slurp noisily, spraying half of it back onto the floor with sloppy trunkfuls. You watch one calf gleefully dunk its mahout's turban, sending the poor man sputtering. You laugh quietly, it's the empire's most expensive water fight. But beneath the humor, you can't help thinking of how many men it takes just to keep these giants hydrated. A single adult can drink up to 50 gallons in a day. 50 gallons. You mentally compare that to your reusable water bottle, and suddenly your hydration goals feel laughably puny. And then there are the ointments. You pass a storeroom where jars of herbal pastes are stacked in precarious towers. Neem oil for insect bites, turmeric for wounds, camphor to cool overheated skin. One jar even contains powdered pearls mixed with ghee, which you're told is meant to invigorate the blood. You roll your eyes gently. Was this genuine medicine, or just Mughal wellness influencer nonsense? Historians still argue whether the empire truly believed in these gemstone-based cures, or whether it was simply the emperor's way of showing off his wealth even through elephant medicine. A mahout calls you over to watch as he applies ointment to a cracked footpad. The elephant groans softly, shifting its weight, and you realize the irony. These beasts who could trample soldiers flat are brought low by something as small as a cracked toenail. The empire may rise on their backs, but the empire also trembles on the fragility of their health. Quirky detail. In some chronicles, elephants were given wine or opium as part of their treatments, or sometimes as a way to mellow out bad tempers. You imagine a drunk elephant stumbling around, and suddenly the whole delicate politics thing makes even more sense. No wonder the mahouts looked perpetually stressed. You continue deeper and stumble into a quieter corridor where scribes argue over ledgers. One accuses the other of inflating fodder numbers. Another insists an ointment shipment never arrived. The debate escalates, and you realize these aren't just clerical squabbles, they're political battles. Whoever controls the supply chain controls not just elephants but also the nobles who depend on them. If you can starve your rival's elephant or delay its ointments, you can embarrass him at inspection, weaken him in battle, and subtly erode his favor at court. You shake your head, because somewhere in the empire, a rebellion is brewing, but here in the stables, the war is fought with missing hay bales and mislabeled ointment jars. As night deepens again, the elephants settle, chewing lazily, their massive bellies heaving in content rhythm. Mahouts stretch out on mats nearby, exhausted from hauling, bribing, massaging, and singing. You sense their relief, but also their vulnerability. Because in this world, a shortage of grain isn't just a logistical hiccup, it's a political weapon. Too much fodder missing, and whispers will start. Maybe the governor of Bengal is diverting supplies, maybe a rival noble is sabotaging shipments. Every missing bundle of sugarcane is a thread tugged in the imperial web. The stable smells of crushed cane and camphor now, sweeter than before, almost comforting. But you know better. Beneath the sugar, the politics are still bitter, delicate, and dangerous. Tomorrow another wagon will arrive, another ledger will be scribbled, another bribe will change hands. And the empire, glittering on the outside, will continue to wobble on the invisible, straw-strewn foundations of its elephant stables. You wake to the tremor of the ground itself. At first you think it's an earthquake, but then the sound grows clearer, trumpets, shouts, the thud of colossal feet. You stumble toward the courtyard where the Mughal war drills are staged, and what you see is equal parts terrifying and mesmerizing. The elephants are no longer just lounging, eating sugarcane, or wobbling their calves around, they're armored, restless, and lined up in formation like colossal tanks of flesh and tusk. You squint against the sun as mahouts climb onto their elephants' backs, settling onto wooden howdahs strapped tight with thick leather. Some elephants wear metal headpieces, glinting cruelly in the light, with blades fixed to tusks or forehead spikes designed to gore enemies. You whisper under your breath, "You probably wouldn't survive this," and you mean it. Because if one of these beasts charged at you, history lesson or not, your bedtime would be permanently eternal. The drill begins with a trumpet blast. The elephants march forward in perfect rhythm, mahouts barking commands in clipped tones. Each step shakes dust into the air, and each tusk glimmers with menace. The nobles watching from the shaded pavilions nod approvingly, though you notice one secretly flinch every time an elephant lets out a thunderous roar. You can't blame him. These displays are meant to intimidate not just enemies, but also allies, proving the emperor's control over nature itself. One historical fact that hits you squarely: elephants weren't just props. Mughal armies deployed them in actual combat. They were shock troops, designed to terrify cavalry, crush infantry, and break formations. Accounts from the 17th century describe how enemy horses refused to approach elephants, panicking at their smell and size. Imagine riding into battle and realizing your horse has better survival instincts than you. But alongside the practical came the theatrical. Some drills resembled pageants more than war preparations, elephants draped in brocade, painted with swirling designs, made to parade past foreign envoys. These displays were stage-managed intimidation, political theater of the grandest scale. And you, standing here, can feel how carefully it's orchestrated. Still, not everything is as polished as it seems. As two elephants clash tusks in a sparring exercise, their roars split the air. Mahouts jab them with hooked gourds, trying to keep the mock battle safe, though nothing about two 6-ton giants slamming into each other is remotely safe. Dust swirls as one elephant shoves the other back several paces, and you catch sight of a noble tightening his grip on his chair. Nervous much? Of course, because if the mock fight spirals out of control, the entire audience could end up as trampled collateral. And here's the quirky tidbit you weren't expecting. Some Mughal drills reportedly involved elephants practicing to lift cannons with their trunks or drag siege engines into position. Others claim elephants were trained to charge walls, battering them like living wrecking balls. Historians still argue whether such drills were practical strategies or exaggerated spectacle. Did the elephants truly break walls, or was that just chroniclers flexing imperial pride? You'll never know for sure, but watching them now, you can imagine both possibilities. The air grows hotter, thick with the smell of dust, sweat, and oiled leather. You notice one mahout singing softly to his elephant as it trots, half command, half lullaby. Another slaps his beast's flank like a coach encouraging a star athlete. And you're gripping the railing, heart racing, realizing you've never felt so small. In the far corner, a line of elephants stomps through barrels filled with straw, splintering them like toys. The nobles clap politely, though you can tell they're calculating. Each successful stomp says, "Yes, these elephants are terrifying enough to crush enemies." Each stumble or hesitation whispers, "Maybe the emperor's grip isn't as tight as he wants us to think." You sense the political theater in every step. Suddenly, one elephant lets out a wild trumpet, veering sideways. Its mahout yanks desperately at the reins, but the beast barrels toward the sidelines. Nobles scatter, silks flapping like startled birds. The elephant halts inches before crashing into the pavilion, trunk thrashing. The mahout screams commands, and slowly, mercifully, the animal calms. The audience regathers, murmuring about minor mishaps, but you can see the tension in their eyes. One rampaging elephant could shatter this entire delicate display. As the drill winds down, the elephants are led away, their armor clanking like exhausted knights. The nobles resume sipping sherbets, pretending nothing rattled them, though their pale faces betray otherwise. You lean against the wall, shaking your head. War drills in the Mughal stables aren't just about preparing for combat, they're about balancing on the razor's edge between awe and catastrophe. The sun sets, casting long shadows across the training ground. Dust settles, the air cools, and you realize you've witnessed more than a rehearsal. You've seen the empire flex its muscles, remind its subjects of its might, and gamble with its own safety, all in the name of politics. And tomorrow, they'll do it again, with the same blend of precision, bravado, and fragile control. You follow the elephants as they lumber back toward their resting grounds, and something curious catches your eye. It's not just their physical presence, but how they linger in every corner of the empire's imagination. You realize the stables aren't just about food, armor, or battle drills, they're living symbols, stitched into the Mughal self-portrait like gold thread in a velvet robe. As you pass through an open gallery, you notice scrolls pinned to the wall, miniature paintings drying in the sun. They're luminous, tiny masterpieces showing elephants painted in sapphire blue or deep crimson, patterned with curling vines of white, tusks gleaming like ivory crescents. One shows an emperor serenely perched atop a howdah, calm while his elephant tramples an enemy regiment. Another shows a festival scene where the animals are draped in brocade heavier than some village's yearly tax. You lean closer and think, wow, The elephants even had better wardrobes than me. Here's a historical fact that adds weight to what you're seeing. In Mughal court art, elephants weren't just background props. They embodied kingship itself, majesty, control, and raw power tamed by imperial will. Abu el-Fazl, Akbar's famous chronicler, even likened the emperor's dominance over elephants to his ability to govern diverse peoples. You picture a courtier explaining this while dodging the flick of a muddy trunk, and you can't help but smirk. And yet, beyond grandeur, the symbolism had layers. Elephants showed loyalty, because mahouts swore oaths over their beasts. They showed endurance, because a stable stocked with hundreds implied that the empire could sustain endless wars. They even hinted at cosmic order, since elephants in Indian cosmology were linked to the very pillars that held up the world. So every time a noble paraded his elephant, he wasn't just flexing his bank account, he was parading the axis of creation itself. No pressure. But here's a quirky little detail: elephants sometimes featured in love poetry. A poet might compare the curve of a lover's eyebrow to an elephant's trunk, strange choice, unless you were deep in Mughal metaphor land. Or a prince might be praised for riding the elephant of passion, which sounds flattering until you imagine explaining it at family dinner. Still, it shows how pervasive the symbolism was. These beasts walked through war camps, feasts, and even verses whispered in candlelight. As you stroll deeper into the compound, you notice sculptors chiseling elephant motifs into palace columns, and jewelers setting tiny elephant figurines into gold rings. It's as if the empire needed to constantly remind itself, we have elephants, we control elephants, therefore we control destiny. Yet scholars keep debating one slippery question: did elephants truly symbolize control, or did they also embody hidden anxieties? Historians still argue whether the sheer obsession with depicting elephants reveals pride or a nervous attempt to convince everyone, including themselves, that the beasts were firmly under command. After all, you've seen firsthand how easily a drill can unravel. What if all those gilded miniatures were less about celebration and more about propaganda? A polite way of saying, everything's fine, look at our pretty elephants, nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, the elephants themselves shuffle past, unconcerned with cosmic metaphors. One scratches its side against a stone wall, showering dust everywhere. Another nudges its calf toward a trough, ignoring the poetic weight it supposedly carries. You chuckle, because while the empire spins symbols out of trunks and tusks, the elephants just want snacks. At dusk, the courtyard fills with chanting. A troupe of singers performs verses celebrating the emperor's might, their voices echoing against the marble walls. And sure enough, the lyrics circle back to elephants, unstoppable, divine, shimmering. You lean back, letting the music wash over you, realizing you've been pulled into the same symbolic tide that carried courtiers, poets, and painters centuries ago. And as the stars prick the sky, you whisper to yourself, in the Mughal world, elephants weren't just animals. They were metaphors in motion, living canvases, propaganda machines with trunks. To misunderstand them would be to misunderstand the empire itself. And to live among them, well, you'd better learn to read the symbols quickly or risk being trampled by the story they carried on their massive backs. The night air hangs heavy, scented with hay, dung, and faintly of rosewater sprinkled to keep the courtyards fresh. You're easing into a calmer rhythm after all the pageantry, but then you notice something unsettling. In the hushed corners of the Mughal elephant stables, whispers stir. Not the ordinary gossip about feed shortages or a mahout sneaking a nap, no, these whispers coil darker, more dangerous, with hints of rebellion and secret deals. You slow your pace, ears pricked. A pair of mahouts lean against a wall, voices low. One mutters about a noble slipping silver coins to stable hands, asking for private access to certain elephants. Another adds that a prince once used the darkness of the stables to meet conspirators, out of the emperor's watchful eyes. You realize suddenly that these stables, sprawling and half-shadowed, are perfect for hiding plots. And unlike a royal hall, where every move is scrutinized, here the sheer smell and chaos of elephants create cover for secrets. Here's a mainstream fact that underscores the stakes. Mughal courts were riddled with factional struggles. Princes schemed against brothers, generals jockeyed for influence, and nobles positioned themselves like chess pieces around the emperor. Elephants, symbols of authority, were part of this game. To control elephants was to control prestige and, sometimes, the very mechanics of power. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some reports hint that bribed mahouts would deliberately misplace an elephant on parade day, causing political embarrassment. Imagine promising your rival nobles the sight of your magnificent war elephant, only for the beast to conveniently wander off with a bellyache. Historians still argue whether these incidents were acts of sabotage or just ordinary animal unpredictability. Either way, the results could humiliate even the most powerful lord. You wander deeper into the stables and see shadows moving where they shouldn't. A group of courtiers huddle, speaking fast, stopping only when they notice you nearby. Their eyes flash suspicion, as if you might have overheard plans better left unspoken. You shuffle away quickly, pretending to admire a calf rolling in hay, heart pounding. What makes the stables so perfect for conspiracy? For one, they were immense, sprawling complexes with countless alcoves, storage rooms, and hidden corridors. They were busy but loosely supervised. Everyone from fodder carriers to scribes had reason to pass through. And, crucially, the emperor couldn't be everywhere at once. So the stables became a stage for side deals, coded messages, even smuggled weapons. Elephants, ironically, provided camouflage. Who notices a few men whispering when a 6-ton beast is bellowing nearby? And then there were the bribes. Silver for access to a ceremonial elephant. Gold for favorable placement in a parade. Jewels for a promise that a rival's beast would be reported as unfit for duty. You can almost hear the coins clinking beneath the straw, the secret payments that greased political wheels as surely as any decree. But rebellion is a riskier flavor. Rumors swirl of nobles plotting to rally elephants for uprisings. After all, elephants were like mobile fortresses, perfect for leading charges or defending strongholds. Historians still debate whether actual coups began in these very stables, or whether the stories were inflated later. Yet you can feel the tension. When beasts symbolize power, whoever controls them holds leverage in a fight for the throne. Your footsteps echo through the dim aisle, the low torchlight casting elephant shadows that look like moving mountains. You imagine how a would-be rebel might use this exact corridor, whispering promises of freedom, plotting routes through the city, rehearsing the moment when elephants would crash through palace gates. One elephant lifts its trunk and snorts, startling you. It's a reminder that while humans spin their plots, the animals remain indifferent. To them, rebellion or loyalty is irrelevant. They just want fodder, water, and maybe a chance to splash mud. Yet it's this indifference that makes them so dangerous. They can be turned into pawns of ambition without even knowing. As the whispers fade behind you, you realize the stables are more than a political stage. They're a labyrinth of intrigue, humming with both loyalty and betrayal. Each shadow might conceal a conspiracy, each coin purse a bribe, each parade elephant a potential weapon in a silent war. And you keep walking, trying not to step too loudly, because in this delicate world of Mughal politics, even the elephant's shadows have ears. The torches flicker low, but sleep refuses to claim you. Maybe it's the weight of the whispers you overheard, or maybe it's the strange realization that these stables aren't just a stage for politics, they're a stage for the emperor himself. You find yourself wandering toward a chamber that smells less of hay and more of incense, and soon you're in the presence of something far stranger. Elephants being folded into rituals that blur the line between politics and the divine. You pause at the edge of a vast courtyard where priests arrange garlands of marigold and bowls of saffron water. A row of elephants stands waiting, their hides freshly scrubbed, their tusks polished. The mahouts hush them with quiet songs, while attendants sprinkle sandalwood powder on their foreheads. It looks less like preparation for battle and more like a coronation ceremony for the elephants themselves. Here's a grounded historical fact. Mughal emperors frequently staged elaborate processions where elephants were not just beasts of burden but participants in sacred political theatre. During festivals like Eid or Nowruz, elephants were painted in bright hues and marched at the head of imperial parades, binding the emperor's authority to religious and cosmic order. An emperor on elephant back was not just a ruler, he was a mediator between heaven and earth. But what draws your attention now is the quieter ritual unfolding. A priest murmurs mantras while circling an elephant with a lamp, the flame's reflection dancing in the animal's dark eye. This isn't spectacle for a crowd, it's intimacy, a sanctifying of beast and emperor alike. You think, they're turning elephants into walking temples. And honestly, you're half convinced the elephant seems to enjoy the attention, swaying slowly as the smoke curls around it. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some rituals required elephants to bow before the emperor, trained to lower their massive heads in symbolic submission. Imagine the optics, a 6-ton creature humbling itself before one man. It's both impressive and faintly absurd, like asking a mountain to politely crouch. Yet the spectacle reinforced the message: if even elephants submit, so should subjects. Still, historians argue about just how sincere these spiritual layers were. Historians still debate whether emperors truly believed in elephants as divine conduits, or whether they used rituals cynically, as theatre to awe courtiers and subjects. Were elephants holy bridges, or just very expensive stage props? You glance at the gold anklets jingling on one elephant's leg and can't decide either. The ceremony builds. Drummers thunder a rhythm, and the elephants shift their weight to match, their steps suddenly synchronized like dancers in a slow-motion waltz. You feel the vibration in your chest, a heartbeat larger than your own. Then, with a gesture, the emperor himself appears, robed, radiant, ascending a platform from which he raises his hand. The elephants trumpet in unison, a sound so loud your bones hum with it. It's not just pageantry, it's a declaration that he commands not only armies and nobles but nature itself. And yet, as incense clouds thicken, you can't help noticing the practical details hidden beneath the mysticism. Attendants discreetly mop up droppings mid-ritual. One elephant sneezes, showering garlands onto a startled priest. You stifle a laugh. Even in sacred theatre, reality barges in with comic timing. It's a reminder that no matter how divine the staging, elephants remain elephants, mud-loving, unpredictable, gloriously alive. Still, the political weight of the ritual lingers. The emperor returns to his dais, his presence magnified by the looming silhouettes of his elephants, and everyone bows lower. You can feel it, the unspoken message pressing down on the crowd: loyalty is sacred, obedience cosmic, rebellion unthinkable. The torches burn lower, the elephants shuffle back into their stalls, and silence slowly returns. You step away, mind buzzing. Tonight you've witnessed elephants not just as warriors or symbols but as vessels of ritual, shimmering at the edge between the earthly and the divine. And as you drift toward your own corner of straw, you wonder, was it faith, or was it theatre? Maybe both. And either way, it worked. The dawn light breaks across the stables in streaks of pale gold, and you find yourself following the rhythm of hooves, bells, and clattering chains into a space where everything feels heavier. Not just physically heavy, though, yes, the smell of sweat and dung does its best to flatten your senses, but politically heavy, as though the stables themselves sit balanced on the edge of a sword. Here, the tension between emperor and nobles plays out in the most unlikely of arenas, over the control, breeding, and ceremonial use of elephants. You pause at a training ground, watching as nobles arrive to inspect their elephants. Their robes glimmer with embroidery, but their expressions are sharp, calculating. This isn't a casual petting zoo visit. You can feel the rivalry in the air, like static before a storm. Each noble wants his elephant to shine bigger, stronger, more obedient, because in the Mughal court, elephants aren't just animals. They're declarations. Here's a straight fact to anchor this: elephants were a direct measure of status. A noble's standing could be read not only in how many elephants he owned, but also in how well they performed in ceremonies and parades. The emperor, ever the master of balance, gifted elephants strategically. A loyal noble might receive a prized war elephant as a reward. A suspected rival might find his requests for elephants mysteriously delayed. Power flowed with trunks and tusks. But here's the quirky bit: some nobles developed personal rivalries so intense that they staged informal elephant beauty contests. They would compare tusk length, skin gloss, or even the elaborate designs painted on their animals. Imagine two grown men, both commanding armies, reduced to bickering about whose elephant had shinier toenails. You almost want to hand out trophies shaped like little golden peanuts. The emperor, of course, played these rivalries to his advantage. You watch as he strolls across the grounds, pausing to praise one noble's elephant while giving only a passing nod to another's. Instantly, you can see faces tighten, eyes narrow, notes being taken. A single compliment is enough to tilt the balance of influence at court. You think, this is politics disguised as a pet show. And yet, beneath the surface, the stakes are deadly serious. Historians still argue whether control of elephants directly swayed succession struggles among Mughal princes. Some suggest that whoever commanded the strongest elephant corps had an edge in a looming conflict. Others argue that it was more symbolic, a way of signaling strength rather than actually deciding battles. Either way, you can feel how delicate the balance is: too much favor shown to one noble's elephants, and another might quietly start courting disloyalty. You notice one noble whispering instructions to a mahout, his elephant adorned with crimson tassels. A rival stands nearby, his own beast painted in deep blue, tusks capped with gold. Neither man says anything aloud, but their elephants posture like avatars of their ambition, ears flapping, trunks curling. The tension is so thick you half expect the animals to settle the argument themselves with a quick duel. The emperor knows it, too. He walks deliberately between the animals, a human thread stitching the scene together. And with every gesture, every pat on an elephant's flank, every command shouted, he reminds nobles that their power ultimately flows from him. The elephants might be grand, but the stables themselves belong to the throne. Still, it's not foolproof. You catch wind of rumors. A noble denied elephants for a parade stormed away fuming, whispering about betrayal. Another, given too many, sparked jealousy among rivals. Even generosity could backfire, like handing out fireworks to children and hoping no one sets their sleeves alight. As the inspection winds down, the nobles disperse, their elephants herded back into stalls. You linger a moment longer, letting the tension settle in your bones. The stables, you realize, are less a barnyard and more a chessboard, with every tusk, every gift, every withheld beast a calculated move. And in this game, elephants are both pawns and kings, heavy, unpredictable, and essential to keeping the empire balanced on its delicate, rumbling feet. The midday sun slants through the high windows, flooding the stables with a harsh light that makes the dust shimmer like tiny sparks. You're lulled into the rhythm of the animals, swish of tails, scrape of chains, occasional trumpet, when something jolts you back to full awareness. An argument, sharp and urgent, cutting through the heavy air. You drift closer and realize you've stumbled into the edge of a negotiation, the kind where whispers have consequences and elephants aren't just beasts, they're bargaining chips. A group of court officials is huddled near a stall, voices low but pointed. They're not talking about feed or tusk polish. They're discussing alliances, marriages, even dowries. And somehow, Elephants are at the center of it all. Here's your firm historical anchor. Elephants often appeared in diplomatic exchanges, gifted not only to nobles within the Mughal Empire but also to foreign rulers as tokens of prestige and goodwill. Receiving an elephant wasn't just practical, it was an unmistakable signal that you mattered, that you were on the emperor's radar. Imagine getting a housewarming gift so massive it required its own stable, attendants, and lifelong maintenance. But here's the quirkier twist. Because elephants were so tied to status, they sometimes appeared in marriage negotiations. A noble hoping to marry into influence might offer an elephant or, more daringly, ask for one as part of the deal. It's like showing up with a diamond ring the size of a football, except the football is alive, eats 100 kilos of fodder daily, and occasionally decides to smash through walls. Romance, Mughal style. You listen as one official insists that his patron deserves 3 elephants to seal an alliance, while another argues that 2 should be sufficient. The tone is sharp, but beneath it you hear the truth. The number of elephants exchanged will measure the value of the relationship. Too few, and it's an insult. Too many, and it tips the balance of power dangerously. Historians still argue whether these elephant-based exchanges actually shifted long-term alliances or whether they were symbolic gestures quickly forgotten. Some records suggest elephants cemented lasting bonds, others imply they were mere theatrics, quickly overshadowed by more practical politics like land, soldiers, or treasure. Still, you can't ignore how intensely these men argue. If symbolism didn't matter, why risk so much breath on it? And then you catch something more volatile. A rumor slips into the conversation. A noble allegedly promised elephants to a rival faction without imperial approval. If true, it's a potential spark for rebellion, because gifting elephants without the emperor's blessing is like minting your own currency. You feel the weight of that realization. Elephants aren't just property. They're extensions of the throne itself. Your mind drifts briefly to the logistics. Imagine haggling over elephants in a cramped chamber, while the beasts themselves stand only a few feet away, swaying as though they couldn't care less. One flicks its trunk and sneezes hay all over the officials mid-negotiation. You stifle a laugh. The image of men in silk robes brushing straw from their beards while debating dynastic destiny is almost too perfect. The argument winds down, but the tension lingers. The officials disperse, but not before exchanging looks that promise this negotiation is far from settled. You watch them vanish into shadowed corridors, and suddenly the stables feel even less like a barn and more like a parliament, messy, loud, full of egos, and forever circling back to the question, who controls the elephants? You step away, ears still ringing with the clashing voices, and let the animal's steady breathing soothe you. But beneath the calm, you carry a truth that settles heavy in your chest. Elephants weren't just animals to the Mughals. They were currency, symbols, weapons, and sometimes the very glue holding alliances together. And every bargain struck in these stables carried the weight of tusks, trumpets, and thrones. By the time the moon creeps back into the sky, silvering the rooftops and painting long shadows across the stable yards, you're struck with a peculiar realization. These elephants aren't just creatures of politics, they're characters in stories, woven into the mythology and imagination of the empire itself. You lean against a wooden post, listening to the soft crunch of hay, and let your mind wander into the tales that swirl through these walls, half history, half legend. You overhear a mahout telling a story to a cluster of younger handlers, his voice low but theatrical. He swears that one particular elephant, now old and slow, once knelt at the feet of the Emperor Akbar, unprompted, as if recognizing his divine mandate. The boys gasp, eyes wide, though you can't help raising an eyebrow. Was it obedience, coincidence, or pure invention? Whatever the truth, the story feeds the aura of majesty that cloaks both emperor and beast. Here's a grounded fact. Mughal chronicles often framed elephants as almost mystical beings, endowed with intelligence, loyalty, and a sense of justice. Court historians wrote of elephants refusing to trample prisoners, as though the animals themselves were arbiters of mercy. Whether or not those accounts are accurate, they show how deeply elephants were entangled in the empire's moral imagination. Now for the quirk. One folktale claims elephants had the power to sense lies. Supposedly, an accused man once stood before an elephant. If guilty, the beast would trumpet and lash its trunk, but if innocent, it would remain calm. Picture it, an elephant as a living lie detector, staring into your soul while chewing hay. You'd confess to stealing cookies as a child just to avoid the trunk's judgment. But beneath the whimsy, there's debate. Historians still argue whether these tales were genuinely believed or carefully crafted propaganda to sanctify the emperor's power. Was the elephant really bowing in reverence, or was a clever mahout nudging it at the perfect moment? Were elephants sparing prisoners, or were the stories written afterward to burnish imperial mercy? The line between myth and manipulation blurs, and you're left wobbling in that twilight zone. As the night deepens, you picture how these tales would ripple outward. A village farmer hearing that the emperor's elephants bow to him might believe the ruler is not just powerful, but cosmically ordained. A child hearing that elephants punish liars might grow up equating the empire itself with truth. These stories aren't entertainment, they're soft power, stitched into bedtime tales and festival songs, making loyalty feel like destiny. You glance around the stable, imagining the animals as storytellers themselves. Every scar on their hides could be spun into legend, this one earned in a duel of champions, that won a reminder of a miraculous escape. In reality, the scar probably came from a loose branch, but myth doesn't care for mundane explanations. And sometimes, the legends bite back. You recall whispers of a story where an emperor's prized elephant, supposedly blessed by the heavens, suddenly turned on its mahout during a parade, nearly crushing the man. Was it rage, fear, or simply bad luck? Doesn't matter. The tale grew into a cautionary reminder that even divine symbols can rebel, that even cosmic order has cracks. You smile at the irony. The empire built myths around elephants to reinforce stability, but those same stories also reminded everyone, perhaps too clearly, that elephants had minds of their own. No amount of paint, ritual, or poetry could strip away their unpredictability. The mahout's story circle breaks apart, boys drifting to their cots, the elder patting his elephant like a storyteller closing a well-worn book. You settle deeper into the shadows, your thoughts humming with the weight of it all, elephants as facts, as fictions, as half-believed miracles. In this empire, politics doesn't end when the emperor leaves the stable, it lingers in the stories told by firelight, in the myths that slip into children's dreams, and in the endless blur between reality and theater. And as your eyelids grow heavier, you can't help but chuckle. Who knew bedtime stories about elephants could be so politically charged? The night grows thick, the air cooler now, the sounds of the stables muffled into a deep, rhythmic hush. You wander one last time along the corridors of straw and shadow, letting each step settle into the packed earth like a punctuation mark at the end of a long sentence. The elephants sway, half asleep, their breath a slow tide rolling in and out. And in this dim quiet, the delicate politics of the stables feels less like a clash of egos and more like a fragile performance, endlessly rehearsed yet never perfected. You've watched emperors parade through, nobles posture, mahouts whisper secrets, and officials haggle as though tusks were currency. Each encounter was sharp, charged, tinged with the knowledge that one misplaced elephant, one overgenerous gift, one rebellious beast could topple balance. The empire itself leaned heavily on these animals, not just their strength, but their symbolism, their ability to embody power in ways words never could. Here's the fact to anchor your closing reflection. Mughal rulers never abandoned their elephants, even as gunpowder weapons changed the battlefield. Cannons might roar louder, muskets might carry farther, but elephants still led processions, guarded thrones, and carried imperial banners. They remained, to the very end, emblems of continuity. And the quirk? Some emperors were so attached that elephants were given funerals, complete with garlands, prayers, and entire mourning processions. Imagine your dog getting a state funeral with cannons firing salutes. That's the level of emotional and symbolic weight at play here. It's equal parts touching and surreal. Still, historians argue about how much of this was practical versus sentimental. Were elephants really indispensable to Mughal power, or were they costly indulgences, symbols clung to long after their strategic value had waned? No matter which side you take, it's impossible to ignore how carefully the empire wove them into its identity. You lean against the gate of the final stall, the wood cool beneath your palms, and feel the enormity of its settle. The politics of Mughal elephant stables weren't just about animals. They were about prestige, rivalry, diplomacy, mythology, and survival. Every trumpet, every gift, every scar on hide or tusk whispered of an empire trying to hold itself together. And somehow, improbably, elephants were both glue and wedge, both loyal companions and unpredictable threats. The lanterns dim. The mahouts curl into their blankets. The elephants breathe, low and steady, like a lullaby older than dynasties. You know you've reached the end of the path. As the stables sink into silence, it's time to let the story dissolve into something softer. You picture the vast empire fading behind you, its palaces dimming, its parades slowing, until only the hushed rhythm of elephants remains. Their trunks curl loosely, their ears fold in quiet waves, their massive bodies sway like ships at anchor. Everything slows. The delicate politics, the whispered rivalries, the fragile negotiations, all of it thins into the air like smoke. What lingers is not the weight of ambition but the gentleness of breath, the grounding presence of creatures who have stood for centuries as symbols and companions alike. You let your shoulders drop, your thoughts loosen, and your body lean into stillness. You imagine lying in the hay, safe between two giants, each exhale from them brushing your skin like a warm breeze. The scent of grass and dust becomes steady and familiar, a reminder that even the mightiest empires are just passing storms compared to the ancient patience of elephants. Their eyes close, and so do yours. The night stretches longer, quieter, calmer. No negotiations left to settle, no rivals left to outshine. Only rest, deep and unhurried, the kind that carries you beyond dynasties and centuries, into the simple comfort of being small and safe in the dark. And as the last lantern gutters out, you drift with it, lighter, slower, softer, until even the faintest hum of the stable fades into dreams.